Disclaimer: the information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GANs processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
And let's welcome Alex in. He's had a couple of flat tires, but you see how quickly he remedied those situations. And this is the way the plasma works as well. So thank you, Alex, again for joining us and continuing to share your knowledge with all of us. So please take over. We see your screen. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you, Gianni, for the beautiful presentation today. Clearly, we can see that what makes this meeting in North America so strong is the participation of all the other continents. And this is a prime example of the success of the plasma science. A lot of people are afraid, of the one nation concept. They have to understand this is one nation representing the Earth as representing the rest of the universal community. So there's a whole different perspective to be taken in. So today, what I would like to do is we start a new program, and I want to welcome everybody to the North American teachings here. And it's a beautiful Sunday afternoon. We're going to start with a new program. As I said last week, we finished it off. We want to continue with the Kesh Foundation plasma science as put forward by Mr. Kesh, and the books that he's published and the technology that is being presented. And so trying to figure out how to move ahead. And I think, and I hope you will enjoy this new direction that we're going. This is the Kesh Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science. We are going to go back to do basic plasma teaching in review. My name is Alexander. I'm from Canada. It is July the 2nd, 2023, and this is part of the new Kesh Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. Since we're in the post-June 6th, 2022 era, and in fact, it's already past the first anniversary of that, we are confronted with a new problem, and that is, how do we keep up with the pace of the new technology that is coming? And so we've had to gather our bearings and understand the difference between outer space, inner space, and Earth space, and keep moving ahead and trying to keep up with Mr. Kesh and the new teachings. And we have to go back to what had happened originally, and we see that the problem is really basically the same. But then there's another thing that has happened And just taking a few minutes here for us to understand our position in the calendar. Because last Friday, which was 2 days ago on June the 30th, we had a session on elevating the soul of the abusers. And this particular session, for the attendees, and I can personally attest that it was a really dramatic experience, but a very remarkable thing had happened. This session was testing new equipment, and the success of the test was remarkable. And so we are now at the point that not only are we 1 year into the new space age, and we are 7 months beyond the start of the new termination of the prophecies on December the 16th of 2022, but we have now achieved a new level. And so this is quite an accomplishment. And I can't explain too much except for the fact that also in the Knowledge Seekers workshops, we have changed a lot of things. So we want to welcome everyone to the North American teachings and understand, of course, yesterday was Canada's birthday, so I want to wish happy birthday to all the Canadians who are proud and standing tall. And of course, in a couple of days, our friends in the US will also be having a birthday. And so we want to wish them the best as well. And of course, Mexico makes up the rest of the North American team. But clearly, everybody on this planet is working together to bring in a new era. And we can see that when we talk about one nation, one planet, one race for world peace, even last Tuesday, June the 27th, we hit the 280th presentation. And of course, that is hosted by Rick Crammond, who not only has been doing that and the KAKT Foundation Plasma Reactor Group on Tuesday nights, but also he's been running the Knowledge Seekers workshops and going back over a decade. So there's been a lot that's been going on. And have we missed something? Sorry. Isn't that something? Yes, we have. Please excuse me. Oh, yes. There we go. So how do we get this information about the plasma sciences put forward by Mr. Cash? So I encourage everybody to read or reread books. Book number 1, which is the Universal Order of Creation of Matter. And book number 2, The Structure of Light. And book number 3, The Origin of the Universe. And it doesn't matter the sequence, because altogether they bring together a better understanding of the plasma science. So how do we convey all this information? And where we left off last week, we were still on the plasma highway searching for outer space. And our embodiment of our little pie in the sky, because isn't that our point of view? And we forget. And so I think it's appropriate that we need to review. Because what happened almost 4 years ago, at the inspiration of the Brazilian community, they asked for a way to streamline the over 6,000 hours of teaching and try and come together with some kind of package that the many newcomers could absorb. As of today, there's over 11,000 members in the Brazilian Telegram group. And in the Canadian, we just, we're mired at a little over 100, which just goes to show you the impact and success that can be generated. But fundamentally, we have moved so far ahead, and so it becomes very difficult to keep going ahead, where we now have a whole host of new people coming on, and they're going to go through the same problems all over again. And as we set out on this journey, we needed students and we needed teachers. And as always, teachers become students, and new students become teachers, and we need so many more. And so we're going to carry on with a new series here, because the Knowledge Seekers workshops are racing ahead, and the bridge is getting stressed between the old knowledge and the new knowledge. And it's not that we want to dwell on the old knowledge, but most of us have this old knowledge, and in fact it's not even complete. So that knowledge is kind of dicey at best, and we've had a lot of anomalies that we've had to resolve. And so please forgive this preamble here as I'm trying to set up the calendar on where we've been and where we're going and how we can connect the two, and make it graceful for the new people to be able to come in. So when I tallied up all the sessions over the almost 4 years, that in itself becomes a large body of work. So what we'd like to do is streamline for the newcomers on a way that they can, at their own pace, catch up. So when we started, we had to understand it's a new science. And as a new science, it had its own new language. And so we had to meticulously go through and describe this. And we did this not only in English, of course, but in Portuguese, Italian, and Spanish. And it was a wonderful experience. And other communities have picked it up and gone ahead. But what you have to understand is that this series is more about the old physics than it is about the new plasma science. Because a lot of people want to relate to the old information. And the problem with that, of course, is that it doesn't allow for people to go for the new information. But the thing is, we've had a lot of examples in the old information that pointed to the new information. But at some point in time, we kind of fell off the main road, fell off that plasma highway, if you will. And sometimes we ended up in the gutter. And so we wanted to identify how this new technology is going to fit into our life, because when I got involved with this in the first place, I just wanted my health back. There was cancer in my family, and I just wanted to get rid of it. And I wanted to find out how to do that, because we were successful, but I didn't understand how we did that. So I wanted to find out how to do that. Of course, I was told, well, in order to find out how to get rid of cancer, you have to understand about life. I said, no, I don't want to know about life. I just want to get rid of cancer, and I just want my own tiny perfect world to be perfect. So I just found out that that was impossible. And so a lot of people are having the same problem with the plasma science. And they're saying, well, we'd like to know about the plasma science, and we kind of have to say the same thing. You're going to have to learn about life. And for a lot of people, this is not what they signed up for. And so it's interesting to see over the years how many people come, look, and leave. And then other people who maybe have difficulty grasping. Well, I can assure you that we're all having difficulty now because the science is moving ahead so fast because the book of excuses has been closed. And so we have to learn about the terminology, nanostate, gamma state, principal matter, amino acids, star formations, plasma state, and dynamic plasma states. And of course, the future of plasma, because the future is today. And so we're in motion. So part of this terminology that we had to learn was to understand new words like magnetical, gravitational, natural plasma, GaN state, nanostate, order of magnitude. Now, order of magnitude does refer to the old science, but what I want to address to you is that the old science is stuck in a box and the thinking is linear. And they say, well, what goes around comes around. Well, that's a nice fancy statement, but do we understand what that means? And so when our thinking goes outside of the box, then we'll see that there's a lot of curves. And that's what makes life so beautiful, isn't it? So we have to go thinking, not only counting outside the box, but thinking outside the box and understand that it's a two-way street. And that there are rules. And we keep repeating the rules because these rules all have a meaning and helps us understand what the plasma science is doing. So we see that the energy states increase by at least an order of magnitude. And so we think an order of magnitude is 10 times. And it's kind of ironic that in the Knowledge Seekers workshops, we have added to that definition. But for this purpose, 10 times is good enough. But the higher energy state feeds the lower energy state. And this was an anomaly. A lot of people were protesting this. How is that possible? Because a lot of people believe that the stronger eats the weaker. And then, of course, to understand different energy state changes and how they manifest. And that there's a difference between natural creation or natural decay. And then, of course, there's that in-between level, which is a catalytic state. And that energy can transfer between these states. And the rates of transfer are higher in the higher plasma states. And there's an order of magnitude again. But there's a unique rule, and this is the toughest rule of all, is that plasma is bound to the ethos of the universe. So fundamentally, the most important rule is the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. But it implies or begs the question, well, how does the weaker strength survive then? And who feeds the higher strength? So we understand, and there's a need for a sequence. And another anomaly is the fact that the magnetical is the giver and the gravitational is the taker. Well, if the gravitational is stronger and the stronger feeds the weaker, then how could the gravitational be the taker if the gravitational is feeding the magnetical weaker? And if the magnetical weaker is being fed, then how can it be the giver? And you see, that's the point. If the gravitational and the magnetical give and take from each other, then nothing happens. It becomes a closed shop, a closed circuit. So we have to understand that there's more that needs to be taken into account. And one of the reasons that this was a problem was because in the advanced science, one of the ways to keep track, because there was a lot of confusion, is that the negative charge is the giver. And if you knew that, and you use that as the foundation, then everything else followed. And it was astounding, the resistance that came from this philosophy. But that's the difference between those who were in the scientific community and the rest of us. And it was frankly even difficult for me to grasp in the beginning. But once I used that as the foundation for the knowledge, everything else just followed. But it's still this anomaly. How does the gravitational become the feeder and the taker? So we have to understand it's a two-way street. And so when we look at the creation of the universe, we understand that it exists from energy. And this was explained in the Universal Order of Creation of Matters, the title of book number 1. And we have to understand that energy is always in motion. So that energy is always positive. So what exactly is the charge? So the charge is the direction of the motion. And so we say the negative is the giver. And then the question is the giving to what? And so the answer is that all things in combination. And how do you get to decide? Well, that's the whole purpose of life. Life is to learn how forces come together. And so we learned a new word called preemptics. And when two forces come together and they do this little dance and they create this maggrav condition, which is actually in 3 dimensions, which we call the X, Y, and Z axis. And as you can see at the heart of it is a positive charge. And because energy is always in motion, you can't stop it. So it has to keep going around and around. So you therefore have to create a field for the energy to run around in. Otherwise, it'll just leave. And so this energy is running around and around, but if it only stays within that field, then nothing happens, you see. So it has to work in combination with another field where the energy goes round and round. And so when we look at the relationship between the two fields, we find that no two fields are in the same size, or shall we say the same field strength. So based on this relationship, the stronger one will feed the weaker one. And so the stronger one, being the gravitational, is pulling in energy. And it becomes stronger. And in order to maintain that field, it has to give, and it gives to the magnetical. And so the magnetical receives that, but in order to retain that field, it has to give. And so when you have this pushing and pulling, then you can maintain this maggrav condition. So in fact, between these two fields, which are connected with the infinity loop, that itself is a maggrav. That itself is a balance. And that field then is able to give and take. And so that's the beginning of the understanding of natural plasma. Natural plasma has to do what we're talking about, charge, which is energy in motion. And so we've seen the principal matter coming together, and it comes together in what we call the antimatter, dark matter, and matter. But matter itself is kind of confusing because we had a capital M matter and a small m matter. And so we had to know the difference in there as well. But that difference was really meaningless because what we had to understand was that plasma energy is counter-entropic. And to be entropic is to lose energy. And so with the plasma energy, you exchange energy. This is a key point. But the matter state has this duality to it. It can be physical. And we call the small m matter state because the physical is the weakest state. And so the plasmatic matter state, which is a capital M, is a stronger state. And so when we say the stronger feeds the weaker, we have to understand that the plasmatic matter state feeds the physical matter state. So when you can touch and feel, and when you can't, but you can sense it. And so you know that there's other ways and means of exchanging energy. And so over the years, we've had a chance to define plasma, and we found that plasma itself is a kind of energy state. And we found that there are many different kinds of energy states. And each energy state is different. Some are stronger, some are weaker. And then your point of view comes into the discussion. And all this had to do with our understanding of our Earth space. But that Earth space was physical. What we had to find out was about the non-physical, the inner space. And we had to find that first before we could go to outer space. And so it was a nice discussion about this Earth space. But then we found out that it affects man space as well. That infects you. And that's important. You are important. And if you think you're not important, well, then nothing's important. So we find that these different energy states, so we talked about the two matter states. In the physical state, we see it as heat and electricity. In the plasma state, we see it as nuclear physics. But in the plasma physics, we introduced nanostate. And then there's a dynamic plasma introduced a gas state. And then there's another state, the plasma state. And these were the basic plasma states that we needed to understand. To be self-serving, because that's how you give and take energy, but not at the expense of others. That's not the way plasma works. It's self-serving, but the enhancement of others. And for a lot of people, that's a strange concept. It's not the way they were brought up, not the way that they live. And then you wonder why this planet is the way it is. Forgetting, of course, that this planet was here before we got here. And then, of course, to justify our ways, we had another anomaly. And that had to do with the understanding of energy and how it relates to the speed of light, and how the speed of light is the fastest speed, and it is constant. And then we find, well, there's something else that is playing into plasma science, and that's morality, compassion, and courage. It's part of the ethics. And all of this has to do with creation. And so the point being here is that when you look at the equation, E equals mc squared, that's energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, that equation is balanced. And as we say, if two fields give and take from each other, then nothing happens. And that's the problem with this equation. There's absolutely no justification for anything to happen. Because when we paraphrase this equation and we say the speed of light squared is equal to the relationship between energy and mass, we know that energy can change. We know that mass can change. But if the speed of light is constant, how does that work? And you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out that this anomaly is a huge fail. Huge fail. And it is the limit to man's knowledge. And so we have to break through that. And we did that with the cups of life. Each of us was able to create something. And remember that these were the cups of life, not the cups of the pandemic. But in order to understand how to make these, we had to understand about nanostate. And so before we get into the nanostate, we have to understand how an atom works. An atom has a proton and an electron, and they work together as a marriage. But the proton is way bigger than the electron. But then when you look at the construction of the proton, it has this combination of three fields: antimatter, dark matter, and matter. And then when you look at the construction of the electron, it has the same thing: three fields: antimatter, dark matter, and matter. And so clearly, there's a difference in field strength. So there's a difference in field strength between the antimatter, dark matter, and matter. And there's a difference in field strength between the antimatter of the proton and the antimatter of the electron. This is a key point. And so when we find that in the atomic structure of things, that these atoms are linked up and they make chains. But when we get into the nanotechnology, we talk about something that's monatomic. And so what that means really, it's an atom that is not linked up, but it is attached somehow. So is it possible to attach something even though it's not linked up? And then on top of that, you can layer it. And so that's the difference between atomic and monatomic. They're both still physical. So when we look at the nano-coated copper, we take a copper wire, which is atoms linked up. But when we put the nano coating on, which has many layers, this nano coating is monatomic. So they're not linked up, but they're still there. And they create this nanocrystal. And they have to be aligned with their charges so that the energy can flow. And we find they create a little diamond structure. And a diamond is carbon-8 in physicality. And so, although it looks like a coating, we can't see that it's monatomic. But if we use circular magnets to demonstrate what monatomic means, we can see that these circular magnets position themselves. And so they have a relationship, but they don't touch each other, because each magnet has a magnetical and gravitational pole and a field force. And so that creates a distance, that creates a gap, but it also maintains a connection. And so when we look at these three magnets here together, in combination, they create a maggraph. So each magnet being monatomic, but the collection of the three magnets creates a maggraph condition. And interestingly, the gap between the magnets also creates a maggraph. But this gap is obviously not visible. So the magnets are visible and the gap is not visible, and yet the magnets create a maggraph and the gaps create a maggraph. And the reason for it is because the gaps operate with the same energy field. It has a magnetical gravitational pole and a field strength. And so we find millions of monatomic nanoparticles on the copper wire. And this creates a superconductor at room temperature. And a superconductor has a high susceptibility. We call it the field absorber. And it sets an energy path priority. Me first. And that gives you a direction of flow and a strength of flow, and also increases the field strength by an order of magnitude, at least 1. And so this is part of the characteristic of plasma. And so plasma absorbs fields. So we understand the opposite is a superinsulator, which means it has a low susceptibility and becomes a field barrier. And in that way, it wants to contain the energy path. It doesn't want to share anything. And that changes the direction of flow and obviously the strength of the flow. And it does this also by orders of magnitude. And this may sound like a very bad thing, but the fact of the matter is that if you didn't have this discernment, you wouldn't have individual things. So plasma is also a barrier of fields. It has 2 personalities. So this is a good thing, isn't it? And we use that to our advantage. When we created the first cup, we created a nano-coated copper coil and another non-nano-coated copper coil and a zinc plate. And guess what? We had a magnetic field and a gravitational field. And we found that that gravitational field is in the center. And the magnetical field is around the outside. Well, wait a second. We thought the gravitational field was bigger. The gravitational field was more dense. And when it's more dense, it's stronger. Bigger doesn't mean stronger. Bigger means bigger. But stronger means gravitational, and weaker means magnetical. So you could have a bigger magnetical field, and you could have a bigger gravitational field, as we've seen in the electron and proton relationship. But you have to take things into account. So we had 2 cups of man, or 2 cups of life, and we created the cup of man. And so each individual cup had a magnetical gravitational field. And the combination of the 2 cups also had a magnetical gravitational field. And so here came another anomaly. What? The emotional is stronger than the physical? If the physical is weaker, that means it's magnetical, and weaker, it means it's a giver. And if it's emotional, that means it's gravitational, and it's a taker. A lot of people have a problem with this concept until you understand it's a two-way street, which means that in the process of feeding, you create natural creation. You're actually creating more. And in the process of natural decay, you're creating less. But in either case, it's a two-way street. And so we had to learn about GANs as well. And then we find, well, speaking of bigger, GANs is bigger. GANs is a lot bigger than a nanocoating, except for one small little problem, that it has a lot of little negative charge points. And so although the GANs is bigger in size, when you add up all the negative charge points, they are way stronger than a nanoparticle or a monatomic particle. And then we find that there's gas in the center. And so the relationship between GANs and a monatomic nanoparticle is like a kernel of corn and popcorn. You get this GANs explosion. And there are many things in life that we have that shows a similarity. And so when you understand that the negative charge is the giver, so that's on the outside. So this is immediately tells you the direction of flow. It comes from the inside and goes to the outside. And GANs have this affinity. It's highly reactive, and it reacts to the emission spectra. Emission spectra is giving. Giving of what? Whatever the GANs is made from. And what is the GANs made from? Well, whatever it's absorbed. Wait a second. So the GANs emits and absorbs. Yes, it's a two-way street. And what's very interesting is that GANs is a natural lie detector, a natural love detector, and a natural communicator. And it too is a superconductor at room temperature. And there are many examples, as I said, in life, such as a dandelion. And here's the seed of a dandelion. And if you remember, the flower was yellow. And that flower is gone, replaced by these seeds. And so with what we've just discussed so far, you know where the negative charge is. It's on those little pointy parts of the seed. And the dandelion will give. But somehow this had to start, so we looked at principal matter. So we had to introduce more terminology beyond the principal matter, the amino acids, the star formations, the plasma state, and the dynamic plasma state. So the principal matter is an energy pack. And so we said that the energy is basically positive. And when we look at the structure of it, we say, well, it's the Magravs condition, which is the combination of the antimatter, dark matter, and matter. And so that becomes a package. That becomes a parcel. And every parcel needs a delivery courier. Well, we're still not talking about that. We're just talking about the parcel itself. And somehow this parcel comes together and has a force field interaction and creates this antimatter, dark matter, and matter. But see, these are all the different energy states. But when they come together, they create this Magravs condition. So it is from there that you can do the giving and the taking. So what causes all of this to move? And so we run into another roadblock where we see that there's a difference between what we call the manifest reality. There's a physical reality. We all understand that. And yet we don't understand what matter state, dark matter, or antimatter is. And so let's look at it as if it was a house. And so we look at the matter states as the walls and the roof as being part of the physical reality. And so you're standing on the street, you look at the house, you see the walls, you see the roof. But if you take a bird's eye view or a drone's eye view and you look down from the sky, you don't see the walls, you just see the roof. And I was driving around the street, the neighborhood with my friend who's a roofer, and we were looking at the various houses. And I said, "Oh, did you notice that house with the broken window?" Well, the roofer said, "No, I only seen the roofs." Well, which kind of makes sense, right? But my other buddy was in the back seat and he was replacing windows. He says, "Yeah, that was the house with the green roof." Oh, the roofer says, "I know the one with the green roof. It had a broken window? I didn't know that." And so we all have our own point of view, don't we? Even though there was a roof, there was a window, there were walls, there was a house, the roofer only saw the roofs. Well, if you look at from a bird's eye view down and you only see the roof, would you think that there were no walls holding that roof up? Did that make sense? So you would know that there is something holding that roof up, and all you can see is the physicality of that roof. And so this is the different reality. Behind every physical reality, there's a plasma reality. And so if we say the walls of the antimatter, dark matter, and matter, these walls that held the roof up, but they're in a plasma state, and the plasma state is not physical, does that mean it's not a house? Remember, a house has a foundation, has walls, and a roof. And all those components together make the house. But someone had to build it. Someone had to design it. And someone lives in it. And someone comes in the front door and goes out the front door to work and then comes back. And this is the way the plasma works. So when we're looking at the physical reality, we have to understand that there's more to it. And now the manifest reality is this. In all cases, there's a plasma reality that supports the physical reality. In all cases. In some cases, the plasma reality becomes the physical reality. This was tough to learn. Well, we had to learn this because we were creating amino acids, and where did they come from? And the amino acids had an affinity. Nitrogen was the facilitator, hydrogen was magnetical, carbon was the connector, and oxygen was gravitational. So if we understand that gravitational is a stronger field, and we understand that oxygen has more mass than hydrogen, so then we understand why it's gravitational. And then when we look at what happens with these amino acids, and we find that they go through a sequence, something is happening. The amino acids become DNA, and then they become fatty acids, and then they become protein, and then they become cells, and then they become more complex cells. And then guess what? It's you're created. And then you grow. And so all of this comes about with the unique action of what we call the phospholipids, where we have these fatty acids that are joined at the head. And it takes two fatty acids to be joined at the head. And we find that the heads are hydrophilic and the tails are hydrophobic. And they form the skins of our cells. And so the skins of the cells are in two rows. And the tails are facing each other. And they're hydrophobic, which means there's water on the outside and there's water on the inside. And so these two rows create a transition layer. And our skin on the outside of our body is the same way. So we can take a bath and we have water inside us, but we have this hydrophobic layer which keeps the inside in and the outside out. And so the amino acids are the building blocks, and they're oily. And 3 amino acids are the foundation. And when you get the fourth one, it has to fold over, and that's how you create protein. And the byproduct of creating protein is creating water. And so we see that the amino acids are oily, and oil and water don't mix. And that's a good thing. Because if they did, we would all be bags of mush. But since we are all made up of individual cells and individual bodies, and we are all able to give and take energy. And so when we look at this GANS, we see as a solid, it's in the physicality. But as a gas, it affects us emotionally. And now we understand that our body is actually a spaceship, and it is loaded with GANS. We are a GANS spaceship. And so the first GANS that we made was a CO2 GANS, which we used with nano-coated copper and a zinc plate, and put it as a salt solution. And then we had the amino acid form on the surface of the water. It was hard to tell. We were also producing more water at the same time, but that's what was going on. And then we created this CO2 GANS. So we had to move to star formations. In order to create a star formation, lay the first 2 fingers of your left and right hand on the table and use the points of your fingers as the points of a star formation. And so when you put them down face to face, those points create the x-axis. But take one hand and flip it 90 degrees. And now the points are going vertically. So in this case, the left hand, the points are vertical, and the right hand, the points are horizontal. And remember the gaps, remember the connection. Now you can see the star formation. So the one that are hooked up with the red lines, that's the base. And the ones that are hooked up with the lighter line, that goes to the point on top. And in this way, this is a tetrahedron, but basically it's a star formation. And so the base is gravitational and the point is magnetical. And when we look at the nanocoating, and then we see that it comes in layers and it's monatomic, then the relationship of these various monatomic nanoparticles create a star formation. And in outer space, there's no up or down. Doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the relationship. And so we have one star formation and another star formation. And the two together created a synergy. So it isn't just a two, but it's more than two. And now when you have these two, you have this energy flow that goes between them. And this becomes the monatomic energy flow. And since there's tens of thousands of layers and millions of nanoparticles, you can see that there's why it's a superconductor at room temperature. And what's the difference between the copper wire and us? Well, copper wire has more than 3 in a chain, so it's a polymer. We're not polymers. We're very much alive. And we're in the plasma state. And so we have to understand, how do these nanoparticles align themselves? And so when we look at the top view of a schematic of energy coming in, we find that in order to capture the energy has to be absorbed. So coming in from the left side, it gets absorbed. And you find that it creates a rotation. And as it carries on to the other, it also has a rotation. And so when you have these two rotating in the same direction, it causes friction. So the purple arrows represent this friction. And when you have this coming together of direction, it creates a movement of the two particles to be apart. And so this is reflected when you look at them, where the two poles are the same, the North Pole being at the top. This is repulsion. There's a relationship between the two fields, but there's a gap. And so if we find that we flip the pole over, that gap shortens. These two fields come together. And there's a path. There's a path from the left to the right. And we find that the left one rotates clockwise and the right one rotates counterclockwise. So the purple arrows are going in the same direction. So there is no friction. It's teamwork. And so you see how that comes together. This is called attraction. So when you look at this gap, and if you understand that the smaller particle is the giver, so each of these circular magnets is a negative charge, and there's a gap. And I tried to put them together, but they just would not come together. So there must have been a field force in between that prohibited these magnets from coming together. So if the magnets are negative, the field in between is positive. And this was representing repulsion. Interestingly enough, we took another magnet, flipped it over, and nothing changed. The negative magnets remained in the same position. But there was only one positive field in the center. Where did the other two go? And so this is what happens with attraction. Now you've brought in more energy. So it doesn't look like anything's happened, but obviously something has happened. And of course, yours truly put the magnet in there, but we don't want to count that, do we? So we see that all of this change in energy has to do with susceptibility. So nothing is nothing. Always something is something. And what is that something? Well, it's something here as opposed to being something there, something else. And so we have this Gans, and it's exchanging energy, and this energy is always in motion. And so when we look at the top of a cup in the left-hand picture, we see that there's a circular field developing in the bottom of the cup. And when we look at the bottle on the right, we see that this circular field has actually turned into a hole. But there's nothing there. How can there be nothing when there's something there? And that's the plasma reality. Plasma reality is always the reality. The physical reality is optional. And so as energy is circling, we find that the sun is circling around. And so in the morning it shines, and at noon it's even brighter, and in the evening is sunset. And we find that the sunlight itself goes from red in the morning to blue in the afternoon, and then red in the evening. And at night, it's dark. And so the root growth is at night. But it's not that the sun is shining, it's just on the other side of the earth, isn't it? So the energy keeps going round and round, and we respond to it. And so the energy, as the sun is rotating around, is considered magnetical. And of course, the earth is taking all this energy, so it's gravitational. And now that this earth has all this energy, well, guess what? The daisies are getting energy to grow above the ground, and the roots from the daisies are getting energy to grow below the ground. Oh, so the stronger feeds the weaker. And so when we look at the star formation, then we understand that the strongest is in the center. So when we look at the representation of protein building in a star formation, and we see the three magnets as they're represented by, in the base, the carbon, the nitrogen, and the oxygen being the greatest mass, so it's at the bottom, and the hydrogen being the weakest, and it's at the top. And so in all cases, the higher energy feeds the weaker energy, and they sort themselves out. The oxygen feeds them all, or the carbon feeds the hydrogen, but is fed by the oxygen and the nitrogen. And an interesting thing happens. We're building up protein, but wait, we have this yellow hexagonal structure in the center of the daisy, and then we have these white petals around the outside. Obviously, something has changed. And yet we're seeing physical manifestation. And so we have to understand that the difference between the physical manifestation based on its plasmatic substrate causes this hexagonal yellow structure in the center of the daisy. And as it moves out, it causes this white petal structure. But then we also have to understand that the tips of the petal are negative, just like the GANs. And so that energy is being given. Where does it go? So we have to understand about dynamic plasma state. Now we have to learn about more terminology. Transmission, transition, transmutation. What is plasma and the dynamic plasma? So we see that the transmission refers to this x-axis and refers to the rotation of the field, whereas transition refers to the y-axis and talks about the polarity of that field. Now the transmutation is the z-axis. That represents the strength of the field. And the plasma itself, well, that's at the core. And the dynamic plasma, that's the energy that goes in the core and interacts dynamically with another field, with another plasma at the core. And so going back to the cells, and you see the layers of phospholipids, how they go around the cell, and we find that the water's on the inside, and there's water on the outside. But that water on the inside that's part of the cell is gravitational, and the water that's on the outside is affected by the magnetical points of the cell. So this is how the cell can feed itself. So obviously the cell grows, and the cell eats, and the cell breathes, and the cell creates waste. So the cell has to be self-serving, and all the doors to the cell have to communicate. So there's a communication that is transmitted all the way around the cell. There's your x-axis, your transmission. But the cell is not an island. It has to work with its neighbors. So that energy has to transition from inside to out. That's the giving. But then it also has to come in. That's the taking. And then the cell has to grow, and the cell has to repair itself, and the cell has to work with its neighbor. That's the transmutation. So we find all these energy states. These are all plasma field states. And they all have their field strength. And they have their sequence. And each state is like a landing point. But there's a transfer state in between each state. And it's a two-way street. So we have plasma. We created plasma from these P and ticks coming together. But in a star formation, we created rotating fields, and we put them in the star formation, and we created this plasma in the center. So each field created a plasma. The combination of the fields created a dynamic plasma, and there it was in the center. And so the plasma becomes a dynamic plasma where it becomes more than just its own physical state. The energy goes around. It is this dynamic plasma which is the substructure. And so we find that it grows. And as a result of that growth, the entire star formation benefits. There's a give and take. So we understand there's a give and take between each and every point in the star formation, and then there's a give and take between each and every point and the plasma in the center. And it's this give and take that is part of the dynamic plasma. Well, this was 2020, and we're in 2023. So what does the future say? Well, we were talking about even more terminology: transformation, transcendence, and transmogrification. Well, now we really have to identify what's the old physics. Well, the old physics, as we said, the speed of light is the maximum speed. And some people believe the polar shift causes ice ages and tsunamis. Well, that was false. And that was easy to prove, wasn't it? But the old science also said it's not possible to regrow limbs. It's not possible to change skin color. It's not possible to change one's nature. Well, the plasma science is maybe it's not possible for you. But let's restate and add to the technology. Because all we have to do is look around and we see, well, wait a second, a salamander can already regrow limbs. Must be a pretty good plasma scientist. Oh, look, a chameleon can change color. So much for the racist color, isn't it? Uh-oh, a caterpillar can change into a butterfly. How does that happen? So now we find that there's even more terminology. We would like to add plasma resonance to your vocabulary. We'll talk about that more. We have to understand that as part of our soul meditation, we have to open up to the energy of the universe, allow it to come in and yield so that we can receive. You provide the pattern, you get the energy, and that's the rule. And so when we look at the spaceship summary and see, oh, well, there's flying saucers, there's cylinders, and there's spheres. Well, don't forget that there's man space as well. We are a GAN spaceship, right? And don't forget that thing in the back, that Earth spaceship. That's a spaceship also. And so we find that we've been teaching these classes 492 Thursdays in a row. And we're trying to transcend the limits of nuclear science. And we've done that. Adding security to our life. Remember that part that you didn't want to learn about life? This is the KAKT Foundation Spaceship Institute, teachings on plasma science, calling all knowledge seekers. Life's learning lessons to transmute your soul growth. There's a world peace treaty, sign it. Sign it with a pen, sign it with your heart, sign it with your soul. Don't even think about it. Just do it. And so we find that the dilution of emotions allows the field of life choices free from boundaries or abuse. The ethos of the universe is what maps your position, and the universal community is your travel guide. Speed of love manifests and determines your inner space emotional construct. It's the earthbound soul family that is going through this transformation. It's a gravitational transformation of physical and emotional vitality. And the emotional knowledge is embodied in this transmutation connection. And it connects equally to the universal cosmic rays freedom broadcast of inner space. These are the simply irresistible plasma times. Plasma times and plasma science needs to continue to be delivered in exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the new outer space age. And that's the end of this lesson. I hope you enjoyed today's trip. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much as well, Alex. I'm glad you got your system repaired. And let's see if we can open this up a little. Glad we went back to basics as well. This is a bit easier for me, although I don't even have all the basics under my hat, so to speak. We're still growing into many of these knowledges. For example, someone brought Armin's teaching from the reactor group into one of our classes. And he had a large GANS, let's say 100 milliliter GANS, and then a 10 ounce milliliter of the same GANS. Now, you would think one is more gravitational than the other. The larger is more gravitational than the smaller one. But when we bring them together, Armin was saying, the small one becomes gravitational to the large one. So again, it's just the opposite of what I've been thinking. We think of large and gravitational, but the smaller one, because it's taking, it becomes gravitational to the larger one. Again, stronger feeding the weaker, but the weaker becomes the gravitational aspect of it. It was just an interesting concept that I really hadn't thought of. Of course, if you separate them, then that's different. But when you bring them close together and they're interacting, the weaker one becomes the gravitational to the other one. Does that make sense?
Well, that was perfect sense. And it has wasted so many hours of students' times not understanding that. And that is because in the physical science, we understand it as a one-way street. We have to understand that it's a two-way street. So, you know, depending on your point of view, so if someone is giving something to you, you're gravitational. But if you're giving something to someone else, then someone else is gravitational.
Would appear that way. And this is
So
the enhancement you were talking about, correct? Through this giving process.
That's right. Well, you have to give it, because if you don't give it, you can't receive. See, this is the problem. Because if you're in a Magravs condition, which represents balance, nothing happens. So in order for you to maintain your position, you have to give and take. That's where the balance comes in.
So again, you talked about the proton being much, much larger than the electron. And I don't know if we know that much about the electron. Maybe it's still mysterious. I mean, not to those who travel the universe, perhaps, but to us, the electron is smaller, but it becomes gravitational to the would the same thing work in that instance? I know it talks about in the book the electron holding the position or keeping the proton in its position, but it's also taking some energy and feeding it back into. So this relationship in a way is going back and forth. One is
okay, so
yeah, it's just again.
So let's say in order for Mark to maintain your atomic structure, okay, you have a Mark electron and a Mark proton. And for Alex to maintain his Magravs position, he has an Alex electron and an Alex proton. Okay, my electron is not the same as your electron. Okay, but my electron, being magnetical, is giving. So let's say now you and I are having this conversation. So I'm giving Alex's electron to Mark. Now Mark's electron has to move. Has to move. So where's it going to go?
Yeah. Again, it's in constant motion, isn't it? The electron
yeah,
is.
It's not going to come back to Alex. It's not going to come back to Alex. You know why? Because Alex is giving. And if you give back to me, guess what? Nothing happens. So it's like a chain letter. You then give to the others on this panel. And what happens there? Well, they give into the peace dome. And what's the peace dome? Well, the peace dome is the collective of the human family that is on the earth plane. This is the thing that we have to understand. We are always interconnected. So for the principles of understanding the giving and taking, for the principles of understanding magnetical gravitational relationships, we have to understand that the stronger feeds the weaker. Most of us have been taught the stronger eats the weaker.
Always.
And this is the problem. This is the problem because that's an anomaly. That only works in certain conditions. But if you reason this out, you would find that if the stronger eats the weaker, Earth would never exist because Jupiter would swallow us up. Would you agree with that? Because Jupiter is a lot bigger.
Right, but what Mr. Kesh was saying recently, if we can understand how the weaker can control the stronger, this will open up a whole new dimension of understanding for us in universal knowledge.
Yeah, because the Earth is weaker.
It doesn't make sense, though, in our matter state, in what we've been taught all these years. How could the
That's
weaker
right.
control the stronger?
That's right. So
we're going to see this in the soul of physicality, moving into the position of the soul of the man, I would think, in a way. And also, the electron is weaker than the proton in a similar example. Again,
yes,
I'm getting...
but you know, in the relationship of the proton to the neutron, then the proton becomes magnetical, doesn't it? Because the proton is stronger. I'm sorry, the neutron is stronger than the proton. So the proton is magnetical, the neutron is gravitational. This concept, as I say, has wasted a lot of time. And the reason for it is because our educational system is teaching us the one way, and it's been reinforced with this stronger eating the weaker. The stronger giving to the weaker is a fundamental necessity for existence. Because if you don't do that, you can't exist. You then start to lose energy.
Yeah, I can
So this
hear
is
it now.
why
I can hear it now. This does not compute. I mean,
no, but
for
if you're
current
robbing from your
scientists.
neighbor, oh, definitely. But you know, I learned this a long time ago, and nothing's really changed in that regard. So the rule was magnetical's the giver. The negative charge is the giver. That's the rule. Okay. So when someone said, "Oh, I want to talk to you about science," okay, fine. If you don't know that rule, then I can't talk to you about science because you don't know science. So when I joined the Kesh Foundation, the first thing that I found within the first 5 minutes is that we understood that magnetical was the giver. Oh, great. Okay, so guess what? Mr. Kesh knows a lot more about science than he's even said. Okay, so the as an observer, I don't have the qualifications to say what this is, but I have the qualifications to tell you what it isn't. And what it isn't the way life works. when you look at conventional science. And if I take from you, you're weaker, you get weaker. And if I keep taking more from you, you keep getting weaker. So why would I want to keep taking from you? How does that help me? Does that make me stronger? If I'm taking from a weaker, that makes me weaker. I need to take from somebody that is stronger. And so a lot of people, what they'll do is they surround themselves with incompetence so that they look stronger. And so what do you get? You get a weak organization. You need to surround yourself with stronger. So the stronger feed you. And what do? What do you do then? Do you stop feeding? No. This is when the synergy kicks in. And now you understand what the meaning of success is. And you're being fed from all these stronger. Now you become stronger. And what does it mean to be stronger? It means to be more capable. It means to be able to do more, have more to do more. And what is it that we want to do? Well, you have to look at the universe and how it's created. And then you look at our situation here and we say, wait a sec, we have a problem. So if I look at my community, and if I have someone who's sick in my community, and say I'm Canadian and I have someone who's in Canada who's sick, my community is sick. My community is healthy only when everybody is healthy. So if I have sickness in my community, then my community is sick. And if my community is sick, well, your community is sick also because I'm your neighbor. And together we make part of the North American community, you see. So the reason we need to be proud Canadians and the reason we need to be proud Americans is because we need to look after our community. Because not only is it important for our community to be healthy, but it's important for our neighbor to have a healthy neighbor. You know, what's the point of you having the nicest house on the block when everyone else is a rundown, ramshackle drug house? What's the point?
Agree.
Chain is only as strong as the weakest link, isn't it?
This is what we've heard, but again, I'm starting to question everything I've heard now.
Well, yes, but you have a basis for questioning it. This is the point. You know, once you understand how the energy is flowing, and then you understand the new terminology and what it means exactly, and then you start to fill in the gaps. And what are these gaps? These are gaps of knowledge. You know, before I came to the foundation, like I say, I don't have access to the advanced technology. So, you know, where is your soul? Okay, how can I sell my soul? I don't even know where it is. And where exactly is heaven? Okay, and what is the problem with the kidney? Why doesn't it look like a liver? You know, how come I got a problem with my liver? Then you know, what's the kidney doing? Oh, I'm going to just stay a kidney. You know, you're a liver, and you're having trouble. It sucks to be you. You know, that's not the way the body works. The whole body works together. Say, hey, we got a problem with the liver. We got to do something about kidney. Okay, you start flushing. Heart, you know, bring in some good vibes. You know, white blood cells. Start to get rid of that garbage, right? Everybody's working together, right? That liver is not an island. That liver is just one part of the community. So that's the way our bodies work. You know, you can't go in and say, oh, you know, you have a bad lung. We're just going to remove it. Really? Oh, you go to the car mechanic and say, oh, you know what? I've got a problem with my right front tire. The brakes are squealing. Oh, no problem. We'll just remove it. You still got another 3 wheels. You'd be okay, right? Well, that's not the way it works. There's nothing for nothing. Something is always there for a reason. So, you know, did you know that you have a left lung and a right lung, and the left lung works sometimes and takes its turn, and then the right lung works and takes its turn? Well, isn't that good? Because then the one lung gets the exercise and the other one gets the rest to recover. This is really good news. So what does that tell you? Well, I used to be a smoker, and you say, oh, well, you know, you're going to damage your lungs and that damage is irreparable. Really? I don't think so. I think someone is full of it. So I couldn't explain why. I can now, but I couldn't back then. But I knew that that was a lie, because I wasn't smoking as a baby, and then I smoked as an adult, and then I stopped smoking, and cells can regenerate. How do they do that? Where did they come from? The cell regenerator? Is there a new store on the corner that I didn't know anything about? You walk into the store and say, oh, you know, I'd like to get my lungs cleaned out. No, you did that yourself. And how did you do that? Well, it's all part of the giving and taking of energy. And so the smoke that was in your lungs was not doing you any favors. And so that had to be flushed out. So there's a system in your body to do that. Where did that system come from? Did you have to go buy extra at the lung repair shop? Or were you born with it? So obviously, the natural healing is a lot more intelligent than the science that we have at this point in time.
No question. I think we have a brilliant operating system here. We just don't know how to use it so extensively, but this is what we're learning slowly, how to open this.
Well, I didn't
understanding.
understand. I'll give you a perfect example.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was looking everywhere for a cure for cancer, and there was this place in Bermuda, and of course they were charging $25,000 for 1 month down there, right? Yeah, whatever, right? And they were having really good results. Well, here's the point. If you were in Bermuda in a luxury place, people usually call that a holiday. And you know, if you ever see anyone comes back from a holiday, oh my God, you're looking relaxed, you're looking so much healthier, you know. Well, that's the problem, you know. When you're having cancer, you leave your environment, you go to a nice environment like that, they treat you like royalty. After all, you've given them $25,000, you know, and everybody knows there's no cure for cancer, right? Because they keep asking for more money. So why would I pay $25,000 to go there when they don't have a cure? Wouldn't it be better for me just to go to some resort here locally? Maybe it only cost me $1,000, but what it is, it's the same thing: peace and tranquility, and a way to get back to nature, you know, and heal from within. Heal from within, yeah, because you're sick from within, and so that from that withinness comes out. And this is what happened on Friday. We all discovered the new connection, the reconnection between our soul and the soul of the body. And it was sweet, and it was universal. That technology is in our hands now. It's not pie in the sky. It's in hand. Back to you, Mark. Thank you.
Yes. Would someone else like to come in and ask a question or make an objection, perhaps?
While we're waiting for people to ponder a question, that example, you go to a spa, a body spa, where you get to relax and heal. It's changing your environment, right? And then you look at the presentation that Gianni made. And what is the wheat saying? Well, you know, I didn't go to Bermuda, but someone changed my environment. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Change the environment, you change the exchange of energy. So the question you have is the exchange of energy working better?
Yes, the wheat certainly looked like it was enjoying living. And we're not.
Yeah, but it was still in the same, it's still in the same place, right? It didn't have legs to walk around, or, you know, it didn't say, hey, you know, put up a little placard, say, hey, Gianni, you know, get me out of this country, you know, take me to someplace nice and warm.
Yeah, Mr. Kesh has always said we're introducing a new science, a new ethos, and a new language. Now, I can see the language being accepted pretty readily. Yeah, we have some new terms, some new understandings here. The ethos may be hard to do, but accepted. We've always heard it's better to give than to receive. We haven't really understood it. Or we're here to serve rather than be served, or find something to serve. But when we come to the new science, I don't know how this is going to be introduced across the board, because many industries are going to say, listen, if you recalculate all these things, you're going to ruin my business. You can't possibly want to do that. And not only in the agricultural end, in the pharmaceutical end, we can't have these recalculations. So I'm wondering, is this debate or this going to go on for a long time, or will the science be settled much sooner than what appears to be possible?
Okay, so if we go back to the cup of man, we found that the emotional cup is stronger than the physical cup. So everything that you've described with respect to all these people who are reluctant to change, they are complaining about their physical part. And so they don't want to give the emotion to change, right? So let's say we're giving the emotion to change, so that's a point of conflict. Okay, so how do you overcome that? So there's a higher power. And if can we enlist the services of that higher power? So, okay, 10 people would have more to eat if, let's say, you weren't so selfish. Well, yeah, but the guy who's selfish has more power than those 10 people. Yeah, physically. But what if those 10 people got together emotionally and said, you know what, we're not buying your stuff. We're going to find a different vendor. Well, you're out of business. And that's what is going on. As we connect with the peace dome around this planet, these people will be automatically out of business. And you got to look at the Industrial Revolution. All those people who were involved in the horse and buggy trade, not a single one was able to elevate themselves into the automotive technology. Not a single one.
Yeah, I saw that in my family as well. My grandfather used to drive the trolley car. And then all of a sudden the buses started coming in. Well, he said he would not drive a bus. He was stuck with trolley cars. He never worked again after that. So
yeah, so we constantly do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, it defies the logic. But one of the reasons it defies the logic is because we have this finality, you know, you're born, you work, and then you die. And that's the sum of our life. Well, that's impossible, because that makes no sense whatsoever. You know, if you were a god, and that was the result of your efforts, you'd say, well, why did I even bother? I mean, there's no point, is there? And so life becomes meaningless. And if life is meaningless, well, what's all that wheat doing growing? Did someone forgot to tell all the wheat that Johnny was blasting with the plasma water? Okay, so uh, where does the wheat get the knowledge to respond like that? What's our problem? Who is the smarter? Who is it? Is it the wheat that's smarter than we are? And look, your case in point. The wheat is weaker, yeah. So Johnny's spraying the water. Guess what? The wheat becomes gravitational, and then what does it do? It gives off its abundance, and who will get that? The rest of the community, right?
And that's what we're learning as well, to give from our souls that leads to elevate. It's the same way, in a way, but not in the matter state, but more in the plasma state, that this is the messiahs that can give from their soul that leads to elevate. And this is a big improvement
Sure.
over the
But,
taking
you know,
aspect. What can I take from you? No. What can I give to you? But not in the physical state, on the field level. That leads to elevate.
Sure, because you're contributing to peace and prosperity, and that's what it's about. And so this is the thing. Say, I didn't want to. I just wanted to learn how to cure cancer. I didn't want to learn about, life. You know, so I was the one putting the limitations on it. So as soon as I took the limitations off, I started to learn about life. Then guess what? I started to learn about how to be more healthy, and so we extend that into the plasma science. Well, I I just want to know how to create more energy, and and you have to learn about life. Well, it's the same question. Well, I want to learn about life on this planet. Well, if you want to learn about life on this planet, you have to learn about life in the universe. No, 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 no. I just want to learn about Earth. I don't care about Mars and Jupiter and you know Zeus or wherever. I just, as a matter of fact, I can't even handle all of Earth. I just want my little tiny backyard. Okay. So we have been accustomed to thinking in schemes that are too small, and so your world becomes important to you, and so everything that around you gravitates to you, right? And but what are you doing? You're saying, well, that's it. I'm taken care of. I'm good. Yep. Okay. So you carry on with your problem, and I'm just going to enjoy life here. Well, you cannot extract yourself out of life. You can't, like a stork, come down and grab you by the scruff of your neck and pull you out of your environment. Say, oh, I've rescued you. You're no longer in that quagmire of all those people down there. You're going to have peace and prosperity all by yourself. So there you go, and enjoy it. And you know what? You're going to be lonely.
Okay, anyone else? I know we're approaching midnight in Europe. So would anyone else like to raise a point or ask a question? We do appreciate all the input we had today, the discussions and so on. We had two beautiful presentations, Alex and Gianni, so thank you both so very much.
So I want to thank everybody for allowing me to continue with these presentations. And Mark, how do you like the direction, this new direction?
Oh, very good. As you said, Alex, why did you say, once reading the books just isn't enough?
Sure.
It can't be. There are so many things hidden within these books we're not even aware, just like with the teachings and the blueprints and the patents and the rest of it. There are so many things hidden not even between the lines, I don't think, so to speak. But the more we understand, the more you can understand more. So it all starts from a certain point and grows into that. That was another expression Mr. Kesh used. The plasma explodes from the inside out. And I'm still trying to understand that a little bit, but this is the new idea of a volume versus a direction in a way. Like the light, when you turn it on in the room, it goes 360 degrees around. A flashlight is different a little bit, but your regular lights start from a point and then explode out. So this is an understanding that I need to delve into a little bit deeper about this plasma exploding from the inside out. So this Big Bang is probably not correct as well.
No, the Big Bang, that's the jaws dropping on the desk.
Oh, okay. When they realize how much they forgot to understand. Okay, I'll just cover some of the teachings that are going on, and then we'll play the Kesh coin if we can, and the final disclaimer, and the meeting will end. Jefferson, your mic is open.
Oh, hello, Mark.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello, Alex. Thank you very much for hello, Alex. How are you doing? And very nice review. Many things from the beginning of your teachings you brought was very nice to understand things that we didn't understand at that time. Was very, 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 very nice. Thank you very much, Alex, for this new approach. I think it will help a lot of us. Thank you very much.
We were all in that position, right, Jefferson? I mean, when we first came to the foundation, not too much of it made a lot of sense to us. But little by little, we started to grow and absorb more knowledge, and this led to that and that. I mean, we're still not halfway there, but we're much farther than we were about understanding the creation, the creator, the universe, our own creation, the souls, and so much. We're so much farther along the line. Not that we have the totality, but we're approaching to understanding the totality in the dimension of the physicality and in the dimension of the energy. So this is a beautiful journey that we're on, and we are, again, humbled and privileged to be here, just to be able to hear about this and trying to understand it. While most people are, you know, playing, and that doesn't mean they're bad or playing in the sandbox or whatever they're doing, they just haven't been touched yet by a deeper, fuller understanding of their own creation in the universe that you're in. So it's just amazing.
That's amazing. Yeah. Yes. I would like to add that yesterday, I think the European launched a kind of telescope just to study, to study the black matter, energy matter, and in the matter state, as well as the black hole or principal star. So I think the humanity is going to the points where nobody knows anything. We see on television sometimes these cosmologists or scientists, they go until one point, and there they don't understand what happens. We know what happens. That's interesting. And now they are sending the satellite, maybe will bring the technology to explain easier the way that we understand. That's very interesting. Maybe 1 year or 6 months, we're gonna have a study in matter state, but we know already how it works. In the plasma state, magnetic field state, all of them are going to that direction. There's no other direction. It's a joining. It's bringing the connection, I think.
I think they'll be happier too, Jefferson, because they realize themselves without admitting it publicly that they're making a lot of assumptions, or they're taking other people's assumptions that they don't believe in, but because they're accepted, they promote them. But truly
Yeah.
within themselves, they know they don't really understand the process of creation.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you,
Just
Jefferson.
to bring it. Thank you, Alex. Thank you,
Yes.
everyone. Good night.
Thank you very much, Jefferson. And just another note is the Brazilian community has been putting these sessions in the archives. And there are other areas as well. So I'm not all up to date, but these are the dates, and people can review them at their leisure and understand that we're in 2023 and we're not stopping to wait. We have to move ahead. The more you know, the more you need to know, and the more responsibility comes our way. So
Right.
we have a responsibility to fulfill.
And if the
Thanks,
creator is
everyone.
still gaining knowledge, where are we? And I mean, we are the creator as well, but we haven't been exposed to this. So there is much to learn and the knowledge is endless. So when you think you've arrived, that's the point at which you fail. I don't think we ever totally arrive. Maybe at some point when you carry the totality in all different dimensions. But we even know there's many other dimensions above the two that we're just exploring now. So there is a little ways to go. Anyone else want to add a thought before I just review the different public and meetings that are coming up every week? Okay, just to review the public meetings, there's a number of them. Let's just see if I can, in a number of different languages. On Monday, we have the public in Spanish, and that starts at 10 p.m. CET time. You can find these in the different social medias. And I think there's, on Tuesday, there's a Bulgarian meeting. Let's see, it's a public, I believe in German, that may be a private meeting. But we know the Dutch also have a public meeting, and that starts at 8 p.m. And you don't have to be a Dutch speaker to be part of it. As we know, nothing is hidden from the soul. So you'll be interacting in a way, or your soul will be interacting, whether you're there in the physicality or not. Again, you can be there. Of course, Tuesday is the One Planet, One Nation, One Race, which is the one that starts at 4 p.m. We go to Wednesday, there is a meeting in Farsi, and that starts at 6:30 p.m. CET. I don't know if the one in Hebrew is continuing. There's one in French, and there's another one in Spanish, the public in Spanish on Wednesday. So we have Monday and Wednesday for the Spanish. The one on Wednesday is a 9 p.m. meeting. Then on Thursday, of course, we have the Knowledge Seekers Workshop. And don't let me forget the Plasma Reactor Group at 7 a.m. on Wednesday. We're trying to put together a little video where we can bring all of these different foils together. It's taken, as usual, more time than we expected, but it is a work in progress. So we have the Reactor Group on Wednesday. Thursday, of course, the Knowledge Seekers Workshop, which we all look forward to. There's a public in Polish and a public in Italian, which starts at looks like 7:30 p.m. for the Italian meeting. That's on Thursday as well. Stefania had stopped in here. I don't know if she's still here. That's probably correct. I don't know if she wants to add anything. No problem. And again, on Friday, we come back to the public in German. There's a public in French, and there is a public in Portuguese. And the Portuguese one starts at, I think it's 11, if I'm not mistaken, 11 or 12 p.m. and that's the public in 11 p.m. it has on the schedule, but I think it's midnight CET time. So those are some of the public and private offerings, but we'd encourage everyone to share. You'll find these links and the room numbers on different social medias, as I understand it. So you can look for that, or invite someone who's a native speaker of that language, and maybe they haven't exercised their native language in a while, whether it be Dutch, Italian, French, Portuguese, and have them go into a meeting. Not only will they be able to use their language, but a new dimension will start to open up for them as well. So that is basically what I like to cover here. Any other thoughts or comments from anyone? I'm going to play the cash coin, the final disclaimer, and the meeting will come to an end. Thank you all for attending. Have a wonderful evening, morning, or day, depending on where you may be around the planet. But it's getting closer and closer. I think we'll be moving and transmuting around this planet initially, and then we'll probably go into some forays into the moon, Mars, and some other places perhaps. Even though the universe is much larger than we think, with the plasma technology, or this movement with the fields, magnetical gravitational fields of the plasma, it's becoming quite a smaller universe, again, depending on how you're traveling. So thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm going to take the screen here. And this is the video of the cash coin, which I believe is still available by contacting the Cash Foundation. It's not a coin for speculation, but it's a coin that will be part of the Cash Foundation structure, where you can exchange it for any goods or services you find in the store, or offers from the Cash Foundation, whether it be for wellness, energy, or what have you.